So I mentioned, I think it was yesterday's program, that one of the tried and true ways to increase your longevity is not to drink, not to smoke, to exercise. Although interestingly and surprisingly to me, exercise is apparently not as clearly associated. The evidence isn't quite as powerful that when you exercise regularly, you're going to live longer. That isn't quite as obvious as it is in the data that if you don't smoke and you don't drink, you'll live longer. I'm a drinker, not a heavy drinker, but a social drinker. And I've really been cutting back lately, mainly because I get hangovers now. Just like one drink, one beer, the next morning I wake up and I know, even if I had one or maybe two glasses of wine, I know I did. So as I age, I'm definitely feeling the impact more, and I'm really cutting back, and I'm sleeping better and feeling better. Alcohol is bad for you. It doesn't cause cancer in nearly the same numbers as cigarettes do. But if you drink, even if you drink a limited amount, you increase your risk of cancer. And it's not clear that it does help you when it comes to fighting heart disease. There were a number of studies. The French don't get a lot of heart disease. The Italians don't get a lot of heart disease because they drink red wine. Apparently, that's not the reason. That's not a factor. So the Surgeon General is calling for warning labels on alcohol. And I don't have a problem with that. I don't think it's a bad idea, but I don't know that it makes much of a difference. We do know what reduces consumption of the bads. And one way that you reduce, because if that's your goal, right, we want people to drink, presumably, it's not the goal of the alcohol industry, it's not the goal of the distilleries, it's not the goal of the brewers, but if the goal of the society at large, health officials, do-gooders, people who care about the general populace, maybe, spouses who want their husband, wife, partner to live as long as possible, then you're like, yeah, smoke less, drink, don't smoke, don't drink, or drink less anyway. So what works, we know that labels don't seem to do much. So here's a little chart I put together with cigarette smoking. There are many factors that have involved, but you can see that chart shows a steady decline from a maximum of about, 40 packs a day, something like that, or 40 cigarettes. Yeah, and is that amazing? Percentage, there it is. I thought that was the number of cigarettes people smoked. So in the early to mid 50s, you had almost half the population were smokers. At least they had smoked in the last week. And in 64, warnings first were put on cigarette packages. And you can see that between 64 and 70, where I have that TV ban on ads, right? An ad on TV advertisement, ban on TV advertisements for cigarettes 6 years later. You didn't see much of a decline, a little bit of a decline, but it was steady. It wasn't any increase. And in fact, when that ban first went into effect, there actually was a little bit of a bump, surprisingly. But then you see a steady and significant decline in the number of Americans smoking in the past week, down to 11%. Isn't that tremendous? I mean, we've really, there's a lot of things you look at society and say things are worse today in so many ways than they were 60 years ago. Not in every way, but in many, many ways things are worse. Most importantly, I think, inequality. Education's so much more expensive for most people, unaffordable. And there are many other examples. But there are some, we've made some advances as well. And one of them is this tremendous reduction in the consumption of a terrible product, one that kills you. Cigarettes. So what caused it? Maybe the warnings had a small effect. The TV ad ban clearly made a big difference. What you don't see on this chart is the impact of taxes. There's been a consistent rise in the amount of taxes that cigarette smokers pay. And that has been the biggest factor, even more than the ad ban, which is really important. I don't want to dismiss it. That ad ban's a big deal. But what we really have found is that it's raising the price of the product to the consumer causes people to smoke less. It's just that simple. We just saw from that chart that a very deadly product is less and less evident in our society because of two factors that are listed on the chart. The warning labels, which is what the Surgeon General wants put on alcohol, the warning labels, and the ad ban. Now, I think a much better way to reduce, or more effective way to reduce the consumption of alcohol would be to ban the advertisements on TV. Again, we're going to get to the tax, which is the best solution, of course. The consumption tax, the purchase tax, that's the best solution. But just raising just the labels don't really seem to make much of a difference. And you can see that while Americans are smoking less, we're drinking about the same or even a little bit more than we did 54 years ago. And like tobacco, the chart shows a spike this time in the, I guess it's late 70s. And then per capita alcohol consumption started to decline until 96. And you can see I put that little red line there. Now, we've always had beer ads on TV, and that's actually hurt the whiskey industry, the vodka industry. People drank less hard stuff because they were drinking more beer, which I would say on balance is probably less bad. I mean, it's better to drink a less strong alcoholic drink than a potent one. But they're all bad for you. They're all bad. Hard liquor ads returned to TV in 96, and you can see the rise since then, right? Significant. We were below 500. This is, by the way, the NIH is the source here of this data. But we were below about 500 drinks per year. That's the number there on the left, if you can see it. Let me see if I can make this chart just a little bit bigger for you. Is the number of drinks per person consumed per year. And it's not as much as I would have thought. So somewhere now a little bit over 500. So less than 2 per year per person. But obviously that's tremendously varied. When the hard liquor ads return to TV, consumption returned. So what does that tell you? Let's just keep the ads off, right? I mean, it seems so obvious. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, but we need those ads. We want it for the TV revenue. And my answer is, so what? Who cares if you want more? If TV stations want more revenue? I don't care. I'm not carrying water for the TV industry, for the networks. Pay your execs a little less money. Pay your TV stars a little less. I think we can all survive. We're all better off if we're drinking less booze, right? So take the hard liquor ads off. That's not something that Vivek Murthy... the Surgeon General can go so far. He can say, we can put warning labels on alcohol. And in the end, nobody really cares. It's not going to make much of a difference. It's virtue signaling. We feel better. You look at that bottle of wine, you see, it can cause cancer, it can cause miscarriages, whatever. Fetal alcohol syndrome. But in the end, it's not going to make any real difference to the bottom line of the alcohol industry. But if you take the ads off the TV, then you're starting to make a difference. You're improving people's health, you're reducing consumption, and you're hurting the bottom line of the alcohol industry. So that's why it won't happen. Don't expect your Democratic Party anytime soon to be calling for any reduction in ad revenue for the TV networks. That ain't going to happen. You may argue, you may say, well, Hal, I don't really believe, because I've heard this, right? Because this was the argument, well, we'll get to it in a moment, I was to say about tariffs, right? Is that, oh, they don't make any difference. Gasoline tax, I've heard this all the time. Gasoline taxes. People are going to drive no matter what. It doesn't matter if you raise taxes. People are still going to use fossil fuels. And we know that's false. We know from data points, from examples, that when you raise the price of gasoline, people drive less. What's really striking and might be less likely to be the case is when you raise the price of the most addictive, I believe, and I could be wrong, so you want to argue with me, go ahead, I will caveat this. I believe that just about the most addictive drug is nicotine. Even more, and I know cocaine, crack, right? Those rats or whatever will keep hitting the little button to get their little fix of crack or cocaine, even until they starve. I think nicotine is even more potent. Gives you even more of a rush. And also more of a crash if you don't, right? People who stop smoking, it's almost impossible to quit. Many people say cold turkey's almost, one of the hardest things people can do. And yet, despite all that, this incredibly addictive substance, you raise the price, people smoke less. 10% increase in the price of cigarettes reduces consumption, 4% among adults and about 7% among youth. So the reason it's less among adults is because the two reasons. Adults have more money, but also because they're more likely to be really addicted. But the 7% means fewer people start. Or if they're just experimenting a little, they say, yeah, it's not worth it. It's too expensive. So if you really want to stop the drinking, raise the price. Just make it more expensive. That's worked for cigarettes, worked great. Take it off the airways, raise the price. The problem is we don't have a government. We don't have legislators that are acting in the public good. They're acting for the good of the corporations that contribute to their campaigns and give them jobs when they leave office. So I wouldn't count on any meaningful change policy.